afternoon, FloodGate family, and good morning to the people on the other coast. Thank you for joining us at another Leadership Live event. And this month, we are absolutely ecstatic to have Michael DiGiulio, who is the market development leader over at Kestra Technologies, has had an exceptional career in med device, but I'm not going to steal his thunder. I'm lucky enough to know Michael. Michael, for the people that don't know you, the FloodGate family, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and of course, Kestra?
Sure, sounds great. And thanks, Joe, for having me. I appreciate it. And as you said, yes, currently with Kestra Medical Technologies, and we're a company in the cardiovascular space. We're a medical device company, and we have the Assure system, which is a wearable defibrillator, and we're newer to the market, and it's been really exciting.
Cool. Excellent. And how many years have you been in leadership, Michael?
It's probably about 20 years now.
Yeah, so a couple lessons learned under the belt here, and so I know everyone's going to love to learn from you. And one of the questions we always get in talking about leadership, especially in med device or maybe just general, what are the key attributes you've seen in your 20 years or even before that made great leaders?
Well, I think it's a great question because I think great leadership is great leadership. And it applies in any setting, whether it's corporate America, whether it's sports, leading an organization, a family. So I think great leadership is great leadership. And a few things that I would mention here is the first attribute I would say is, for leaders that are in this space, is lead from the front. It's really important to set the example and the pace and the culture of your team. And we always hear that the team walks in the shadow of the leader, and that's true. So how the leader is going to operate with respect to the team is what the team is going to observe. So that's really important. The second thing is that I would say know the details. Really get into the details of the business. One thing that I would kind of outline when I was talking to folks is I would draw a bell curve. And I'd say, when you approach, leadership in a general way, you're going to be stuck in the middle of that bell curve. Work to get to the far right end of that bell curve. Be exceptional. And it's knowing the details. Really know the business really well. And it does a couple things. One, it increases credibility of the leader. But two, it also can help a leader identify opportunities that they may not have seen otherwise if they approached it in too general of a way.
Yeah.
So that's the second thing I would say.
Yeah, no, that's really I like that in the details and that bell curve analogy of just really getting that last 2% that really separates you from the masses, right? Knowing that difference of what to do. That's I hadn't heard that before. I love that analogy on there. Now I'm sure there's probably been occasions in your 20 years where you've learned kind of the lessons the hard way, if you will, the mistakes you might have made. What landmines can you tell everyone around that in leadership now so they don't hear the click? What would you recommend?
Well, in first getting into leadership, one of the things that you hear a lot is, not everybody is going to work as hard as you do. And, in my early experience, to a degree, some of that was true. But I think that when you have the right people on the team, it's really not as much a matter of effort as it is the way that people are going to work. And, they're not always going to do it the way that you did it when you were an individual contributor. And I think it's really being aware and observant that everyone has got a different style. They have a different way to do it. Certainly coach, teach, and develop them. And, they're going to apply their style. And when the results are there, that's fine. I think the message is that things can be done in a different way. And it's really observing that, people are going to have a different approach. And so that's the first thing. The second thing is avoid sweeping generalizations unless they're intentional. If you're, really talking about perhaps an initiative to the team or a particular process or something of that nature, then a general, delivery of the message is fine. I think when you talk about other things, you should be more specific. So, for example, if the team, wins an award or is number one or achieves quota, whatever that may be, I think it's important certainly to recognize the team's achievement and then get specific to the individual contributors and how they contributed to that result. It may have been differently. They could have opened up a new account, developed a new prescriber, a different area of the business. And I think when you get specific, it's really important. I think it's more meaningful to the team.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, you did a great job. I love the way you presented this product to Dr. Patel and, the impact that, whatever the story is. I love that. And I also, really interesting that you bring up the point is, it's not that people don't have the effort. It's how they approach it and to focus on what they've done, not how they do it. Because, a lot of new leaders try to create their quote unquote mini me's, do what the exact way they did it. But everyone's going to be different in that flavor and give people that freedom to act as they and execute as they feel comfortable, but with a clear achievement and accountability. I love that's a very, very astute lesson. I know I didn't do that when I started as a leader myself.
Right.
So it's good. Now we all, have some high performers on the team, and I'm sure there's a lot of people listening or will be listening to this that have those high performers. You don't want to lose them, and you want to make sure you're able to harness that impact. So, so they can achieve where they want to be. So what have you done to develop high performing leaders? What would you recommend people to do to develop those high pros in their company?
Well, the first thing is you need a high level of talent on the team. You need that talent and capability to work with. And the goal that I always had was to develop 360-degree capability. And what I mean by that is the measure for me is the less my people needed me, the better job I was doing of developing them. And I would talk to people about there's no need to over justify your job. If you're in the field and somebody executes a fantastic call, then tell them that they did that and review the reasons why. No need to unnecessarily pick out some things that, but you could improve on this. Look, if the call went fantastic and it was a home run, then that's the key to it. So I would really, focus on that. The other thing is ask a lot of questions. It's really about developing their thought process and put them in different scenarios. In the field during field travel, what would you do in this situation? But those are leadership questions. Mm-hmm. What would you do if somebody on your team did A, B, or C? How would you respond to it? So those questions are really important. Also, back to the earlier point, development is through observation. So if their leader plans well, they're organized, they're timely, they're accountable, and all of those things, then people are going to understand that and they're going to adopt those behaviors. The last thing that I would say, which was really helpful, put people when the timing is right in particular situations that are going to challenge them, whether it's presenting at a meeting or running a call or something like that. That's really important because you're putting them in more of a leadership role and allow them to expand a bit from their current role.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, give them those challenges, those ways to be able to do it. Celebrate the little victories. When they're doing something right, reinforce it. And I like you said, to have high potential people, you need a team of high potential. I mean, it wasn't just Jordan on the Bulls back then. You had Pippen and Rodman, and it had a whole team, but it raised everybody up. So high performers could even do more.
I think the last thing, Joe, to add, which was an important question posed to me early on, which I would encourage people to think about, is when you're running a team, who on your team could take over for you? Mm-hmm. And if you're looking around saying, I'm not sure, well, there's a gap there. You should have at least one, and ideally more than one, that could take over your position.
Yeah. I remember going through succession planning process quarterly, in our leadership, just to kind of force the question, right? Like, who are you putting in that box? And if you really struggle with it, well, you realized your problem, right? So it's good. I love that. Now, to get that great team, to get someone's successor, you've got to find them. You got to evaluate it. You got to get them on board. So I know you've hired, you mentioned, hundreds of people over your 20 years. So how do you find and how do you evaluate new talent? What suggestions do you have for people?
Well, everything boils down to really the interview process,
Okay.
right? So it's got to be thorough and it's got to be on purpose. It's the most important thing that a people leader will do. And at times you'll see people that cut that process short. Perhaps there's a time restraint and they have to fill spots and things, but the reality is you always want to hire the best. And that requires a very thorough interview process. You can still be efficient and be thorough. It doesn't have to take that long. So I can review a couple ideas or suggestions with respect to the interview process as well.
Yeah. What would kind of thumbnail? What's your perfect? Do you have a process that you execute that if someone's saying, "Hey, I just took over leadership, I need to get a team together," do you have a go-to format?
Sure. I can give a couple suggestions here and perhaps walk through the beginning part, and then I think people will understand sort of perhaps some of the techniques. For example, let's take round one. For me, at least, it was always 30 minutes. And in that time, I felt like I could get a very good understanding of that individual and their personality, their background, some of their capabilities. And in the beginning, it was really about setting the expectation with them and say, so for today, we're going to review two things. One, it's your resume and your background, some of your accomplishments. And in addition, we're also going to review the job and talk thoroughly about the job that we're looking to fill and that you're pursuing. So you wanted to be clear in that regard. And it was structured. You want to, see that they're actively listening. You can evaluate their communication style, how they kind of walk through their resume. Is it a logical flow? Is it concise? And are they aware of the time? If it gets down to the end and they're still talking, some of the really good candidates would say, listen, I know we only have 5 minutes left, and I really wanted to mention this. So there's some things within that you're assessing. And after you do that, then at least for me, I would say, here's a study, because they would close and they have to close, based on our presentation today. I'm excited to move on to the next step. Can you tell me a little bit about what that looks like? And I would say, sure, here's what we can do. Here's a study that's really important. The field uses it all the time. It's very effective. I'd like you to take this and let me know your thoughts on this particular study. And you really leave it there with very little direction. And the good candidates would say, well, how would you like me to follow up? And I would say, I'm going to leave that up to you. And what you're really assessing there is time and content. How long does it take them to follow up? And what does the content look like? And that's an example of how they would run their business. Is the follow-up quick? Is it within a day or two tops? And what did the content look like? Was it thorough? Some of the best folks that I hired would evaluate the study in a PowerPoint. Well, that's a great indicator of how they're going to run their business. And some would follow up with 2 quick sentences. Well, that's another indicator of how they're going to run their business. So that was round one, and that led into round two. And so in the beginning of round two, it was really recapping what happened in round one and ask questions. What were your thoughts on round one and the information that we reviewed? And you want to know that they can recall the information and they captured the key points and things like that. Yeah. And then it moves into, go ahead.
I apologize. Go ahead.
Okay. But then that moves into the study. Hey, I received your review of the study. Thanks very much for that. What did you think? And you want to get them talking about, when I looked at it, this was the design, these were the key points. And this is really, how I would communicate that to a physician. And that leads into, frankly, an opportunity to role play. And you could say to candidates, it sounds like you'd be very comfortable in presenting this in front of a doctor, for example, and they'd say, absolutely, I would. Well, why don't we do that? Let's walk through it. And the best candidates will sit up and say, fantastic. Are you the doctor? And they want to get into it. So it's just another indicator, right? So you can go through that. And then the other part of round 2 is scenario-based questions. See if they can think on their feet, see if they can problem solve, and situations like that, which then led to a field travel, and put them in the role and put them with somebody on your team that is going to be part of the interview process. It's not just a ride along. They have to ask questions. And what did you see in this call? And over lunch, ask them, what's interesting to you about joining our organization? What stood out for you? And really have that conversation from a peer point of view. And to close on this, think about it in 2 interviews, which would take about, call it an hour or an hour and a half. You've assessed their personality, their communication style, the follow-up, how they would run the business, all of these capabilities. And it frankly took an hour and a half. So you can be thorough and timely at the same time.
I love that concept. I love that. Thorough and timely, and allows you to get what's most important, I think, in hiring too, is get to that decision faster, right? You've been thorough, but those great candidates don't disappear because you took too long in considering, and you're able to assess fast. So that's great. Now, I know there's a lot of listening in. There's a lot of leaders, people that want to be leaders. And the question I always get for aspiring leaders, how do you get noticed? How do you get tapped? How do you get into the track? What would you recommend?
The first thing I would say is be prepared. I always think about when preparation meets opportunity, and make the effort to be prepared. There's plenty of books out there. There's internet courses. There's mentorship. And really prepare yourself for when the opportunity presents itself. You need to be ready, and then you can really perform in the interview process. And a couple books that I really liked early on, and I still like today. Number one is the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, John Maxwell. And the other one is,
love that. Yep.
That's great. Yes. And the other one is the Harvard Business Essentials, the Manager's Toolkit. And I really think those 2 are really valuable books with a lot of lessons in them. So the first one is prepare. The second thing is leadership is assumed. My message would be, don't wait. Raise your hand, participate, contribute, volunteer, have a presence where people know your name and you can really get it out there. So, have a level of contribution that is different perhaps than some of your peers. And the last thing I would say is try to put your mark on something with respect to the business, meaning in your name on something, meaning it may be a new way to approach the business, or a new process, or another business opportunity that the business wasn't really looking at. So work to identify something like that and really have it formally down on paper where you can then speak to it. So I would probably focus on those 3 things.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, taking ownership of something, make an impact, being a student of the game, right? Leaning ahead of it, and preparing. So when you're met with that opportunity, and those are 2 great book suggestions. We'll go ahead and put those in the feed here, so someone can link to it. So if someone wants to order the book, they will. You can get those books, because I haven't read the second one, so that's going to be on my reading list. But I definitely the Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. is an incredible one. We actually reviewed that with my leadership team here recently. So great suggestions. Those engaged in the FloodGate family right now, I've been asking Michael DiGiulio a lot of great questions, been answering, but I'm sure there's things, whether it's on interviewing, whether it's on evaluating, whether it's on leading and setting strategy. Put those in the chat. Put those in the comments below. We'll pull those up here. We've got one or two more questions for Michael, and then we'll pull into those questions. So take the time, put that in the comments below, and we'll pull that in here in a moment. So, Michael, this is probably the hardest question of the day. I'm putting you really on the spot with the superhero question. Who is your favorite superhero and why?
It's an interesting question, and I'll answer that in this way. I probably have similar favorites as a lot of people. Superman comes to mind for all the obvious reasons, but think about it this way. Superheroes have all these powers. They have strength and speed, and they can fly, and they can do all of these things. And how I think about it is, who really wants all of those advantages? To tell you the truth, there's too many advantages. The playing field is not equal. To me,
right.
A superhero is somebody without extraordinary powers that can accomplish extraordinary things. And so think about it this way: people like Einstein and Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Lincoln and people like that, they accomplished extraordinary things, but they couldn't fly. They couldn't jump over a building. And think of some other people like Frederick Banting, who discovered insulin in 1920, or Alexander Fleming, penicillin in 1928.
Yeah.
These medical breakthroughs have saved millions of lives. To me, those are superheroes. They're more relatable to people too.
Right.
But those are superheroes.
Yeah, I don't think 5 foot 90-pound Mother Teresa is probably going to make the Marvel series, right? And but that impact that she made in the lives of millions in India and beyond is incredible. So it's a great way to look at it, great way to think, right? And it also inspires us. We don't need to come from the planet Krypton to be able to do something with our lives, right?
That's right.
That's right. So good. We got a couple. I want to take some questions for the FloodGate family. So again, guys, put some comments if you're listening in now. Put them in the comment below, and we'll go ahead and take some questions for the FloodGate family. Let's see what we got here so far. We got from Jacqueline here. What's the most important thing you've learned from one of your past leaders?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think there's something to be said for being inspirational. And there are a lot of things. That's the first thing that just came to my mind. An inspirational leader. In my past, I've seen that when they can get on stage and present, and based on how they're presenting and what they're presenting, it's got to be valuable, but how they're presenting it really fires people up. And I think there's something to be said for having that presence when you can really inspire the masses.
Mm-hmm. That's and I've seen people inspire different ways. Some have the Ron Popeil, level of energy, and some have just that quiet power, that is there, and that's just there's strength behind their metered words. So I think there's different ways to inspire, but that's a very good point, guys. If there's any other comments, please put them in. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and we got another one. This is a great one from Greg. I appreciate Greg jumping in here. Can you teach someone to be inspirational? It's a great question. I think I've read debates on this. So what's your thoughts?
I like it, Greg, a lot. So how I look at it is inspiration is how the audience is going to respond. That's the response. So can you teach somebody to get an audience to respond? I'm not sure, but can you teach them the technique or the method or the way in which to try to do that? I think you can. Now, whether they become inspired or not, that's really up to the audience to decide. So I hope that makes sense. You can teach the method, and hopefully people can deliver it in a way that inspires people. The ultimate measure is going to be, well, were they inspired or not?
Right. So that's a great, and I've heard, kind of most skills, you kind of have some innate abilities, right? And some could be here, some could be here, but that work basis, if someone's, working like this and the other one's not, they eventually cross or meet. And you can get there with the right effort and the right coaching, the right practice and the right repetition, etc.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah. So Greg's throwing out a little thank you there. So guys, we're kind of running out of time, but I appreciate everyone joining hold on one sec. There we go. Time with Michael. Michael, thank you so much for sharing insight. I know it's given me a couple arrows to put in my leadership quiver, and I really hope, FloodGate family, that you found some arrows to put in your quiver so you can lead more effectively, land that leadership role, and really, and since we're a med device, having a chance to really improve lives. And that's what we love to do. Michael, thanks for the time. And thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much for having me.